Hey guys, we are in our free online coaching classes for the JAM examination, and this video will be the lecture 13 in this series. And the topic is Geological Work of the Wind, and the book which I referred is The Principles of Geomorphology, William D. Thornberry, Engineering and General Geology by Parveen Singh. Welcome to my channel Success Guru and myself Panchanadam, and let's get into the heading. The geological work of the wind. Atmosphere is composed of mainly of gases that are collectively known as the air, and the moving air mass is known as the wind. Wind is one of the major agents that changes the surface of the earth. The movement of wind is caused by the uneven heating of the earth by the sun and the earth's own rotation itself. During such a movement, wind may create temporary or semi-permanent changes on the land, which act as an agent of erosion, as a carrier of transporting material, and deposits the transported material. The extent of geological action of the wind depends on the volume of the acting wind, the velocity of the wind, the nature of the surface over which the wind blows, the time duration, etc. So let us see the action of wind as an eroding agent. Wind process by itself not having much erosive power over rocks or even the ground covered with vegetation. But when the moving over dry land with sufficient velocity, wind performs work of erosion in three different methods. That is the deflation, the abrasion and the attrition. So let us see one after other. The first one is the deflation. That in Latin it means the blow away. The process of removal of particles of dust and sand by strong wind is called as the deflation. It is the main process of wind erosion in desert region. Deflation may sometimes lead to the formation of depression, and if it is of small scale and shallow depression, then it is called blowouts. You can see here the image of a blowout which has been created by the deflation process. And if the depression is so deep that it might be partially filled up with the water, that forms the oasis. The Quatara depression of western Egypt is one of the biggest blowout, that is also called as the slack, which is 300 km long, 150 km wide, and its base is say 130 meter below the mean sea level. There is another landform called Hamada, is a barren rock surface in the desert which has been exposed due to the blowing out of sand over it. So these are few of the landforms that has been created by the deflation process. And the next one is the abrasion. So wind is a powerful agent of removing and abrading the rock when naturally loaded with sand and dust particles. This type of erosion involves rubbing, grinding, abrading and polishing the rock surface. The features that are formed due to the wind erosion are yardang, pedestal rock, ventifacts, etc. So the first one is the yardang or elongated low-lying ridge forming overhangs above the local depression. The trend is parallel to the direction of prevailing wind. Actually, yardangs are formed in areas where the rocks of alternate hard and soft characters lying one above the other with generally gentle slope. The soft lying get abraded quickly, leaving the hard rock as overhanging ridges. The next one is the ventifacts. These are the small sized rock fragments showing 1, 2 or 3 or even more typical wind polished surfaces, that is called as the faces. They about in many rock desert they are abundant in many rock deserts. The polishing of different sides of originally rough fragment is caused by the prolonged wind abrasion phase after phase. After one phase gets polished partly or completely, a second phase is made available for wind due to the overturning of the fragment during the strong gush of the wind. This process might repeat over and over again, developing multi-phased fragments. These wind polishes and faceted rock fragments are called the ventifacts. Although 2 or 3 polished faces are quite common, ventifacts with up to 8 polished faces have been observed. And the next one is the pedestal rock, or also called as the mushroom rocks, because of their likeliness to the mushroom popped up close to the level ground. They are flat topped rock masses that are characterized with slender support rock stem. The top is commonly referred as the overhang and the slender stem as pedestal. In fact, the overhang and the stem are of the same rock that has been eroded by the wind quite unevenly, resulting in mushroom-like appearance of the rock mass. These are generally only a few meters in height. Because of the density, most of the sand particles are carried along in the lower layer of the wind. Generally, wind within a height of about 2 meters from the surface. Hence, the abrasive capacity of the wind moving closer to the surface is much higher than that of the wind blowing in the upper region. Continuous excessive abrasion at the pedestal region might ultimately erode the flat rock top that might collapse on the ground. So these are the few of the erosional features of the abrasion. The next one is the attrition by the wind. The sand rain and other particles lifted by the wind from different places are carried away to considerable distance. During this journey, the particles are not moving in a straight line for a simple reason that all the particles are not of the same weight, and wind velocity also varies from base to the top of the current. The grains are therefore moved in a zigzag fashion, colliding with one another again and again. These repeated collision cause lot of mutual rubbing due to the impact. The wear and tear of loaded sediments suffered by them due to the mutual impact during the transport process is termed as the attrition, and is primary reason for the reduction of size for the loaded particles. The next one is the important thing, that is the base level, that is defined as the lowest level of a land below which erosion cannot take place. And for wind, the base level of erosion is the water table level, which may be far below the sea level. So you should remember this term, that is the base level of erosion below which the wind cannot do its erosional process. So the next one is the method of transportation. The first one is the suspension. The light density clay and silt particles may be lifted by the wind from the ground and carried high up to the upper layer of the wind, where these moving along with the wind. This is called the transport in suspension, because the particles once lifted are not allowed to rest in the ground again till the velocity of the wind in those upper region is checked considerably, as by the intervention of rain or snow or slowing down due to the distance involved. The second one is the saltation. The heavier and coarser sediments such as sand grains, pebbles and gravels etc. are lifted up periodically during high velocity time and only for a short distance, and that too for a small height above the ground. Their movement takes place close to the surface, generally up to 2 meters. They may be dropped and picked up again and again during the transport process from one place to another. Saltation is the process of sediment transport in a series of jumps. Even this type of load may still be transported over short distance by a strong wind through rolling, skidding and sliding motion along the ground. This type of sediment transport by the wind is also included under the saltation process. The last one is that on the slope of heap of loose material as in sand dune, the displacement of particle delicately balanced at the angle of repose. Wind may induce down the slope displacement by their velocity, and this displacement is sometimes specially referred as the creep, which is a slow movement along the slope. So these are the three main transporting method of the wind. So let us see the deposition by the wind. The wind deposition are commonly called as the aeolian deposit. Sediments and parcels once picked up by the wind from any source on the surface are carried forward for a varying distance depending on the carrying capacity of the wind. Whenever and wherever the velocity of the wind suffers a check for one reason or another, a part or whole of the wind load is deposited at that place itself. The factors that commonly result in checking the velocity of wind includes prominent obstructions such as hills, mountains, forest belt and also precipitation. The load dropped by the wind in a particular region may be very small or of considerable volume. These are of two main types, that is the dunes and the loess. So let us see one after the other. The first one is the dunes. They are variously shaped deposits of sand graded particles accumulated by the wind. A typical sand dune is defined as a broadly conical heap of sand characterized with two slopes on either side of the middle ridge or crest. A dune is normally developed when a sand laden wind comes across some obstruction, a small bush or raised surface, or even a pre existing dune. The obstruction causes some check in the velocity and that drops some load sand particles along against or over the obstruction. When this process is continued for a longer time, the accumulating sand takes the shape of a mound or a ridge meeting the definition of the dune. And the dunes have been classified further and we will see one after the other. The first one is the Barkan dune, and it is a large crescent shaped dune lying at a right angle to the prevailing wind and having a steep conical leeward side with a crescentic tip pointing wind direction. The wind should be of unidirectional for the formation of the Barkan dune. The second one is the transverse dune. These are the long sand dunes with a wavy ridge running along their length. These dunes are arranged in a row that are parallel or side by side with one another. They are made by the wind carrying lots of sand. The ridges lies at right angle to the direction of the wind. The third one is the longitudinal dune, a larger elongated dune lying parallel to the prevailing wind direction is called as the longitudinal dune. And these are usually having symmetrical cross section and they generally form in areas that are located behind the obstacles where sand is abundant and the wind continuous constant and strong. And the next one is the sigmoidal dune, which is sometimes referred as a longitudinal dune. A typical sigmoidal dune is a steep-sided ridge that extends in sinus or S-shaped outline. Both the sides of the sigmoidal dune are steep, inclined at an angle of say 25 to 32 degree. In Arab countries, these dunes are called as safe because they appear similar to the Arabian sword. The next one is the star dune, and these are the dunes that formed in a sandy desert when the direction of wind changes a lot. And these dunes have three or more arms and unusually irregular shape. The dunes may grow to a considerable height and are generally taller than other type of sand dunes. So these are some of the sand dune types. And the next type is the loess. The term loess is used for wind-blown deposits of silt and clay-grade particles. The typical loess is unconsolidated, unstratified and porous accumulation of particles of size ranges from 0.01 to 0.05 mm in diameter. This size fraction makes almost 40% of the particular loess deposit, rest being made up of silt, fine clay grade materials. The lowest deposits are considerably most widespread example of aeolian deposit. They occur in North China, North America, Europe. The lowest of North China is one of the best example of lowest deposits in the world. It is shown in the figure there. These are spread over thousands of square kilometer, occurring thickness of 200 to 300 meter, and it is typically of yellow color with brownish or grayish shade. A very interesting property of this loess is that its deposit can be cut easily with a knife. Most of the loess deposits are characterized with the property of making nearly vertical cliffs, and they are economically very important as they are very fertile soil. I hope this will be sufficient for this heading, that is geomorphic activity of the wind. I group my videos according to the category that you can check in my playlist. You can connect with us by mail, Facebook and Instagram. You can support us by like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.